Welcome back to Gout Training Hacks. You know, the hip flexors are an incredibly important muscle. Often overlooked, but incredibly important. And that's because clearly they flex your hips, and that's why they're so important. Because if you can't flex your hips, or if your hip flexors aren't really doing the job as they should, your brain's going to find other muscles or muscle groups to help your hip flexors with hip flexion. Your brain will look for help up and down the kinetic chain, from your neck to your shins. So recruiting these other muscles to help flex your hips will create muscle imbalances around the joints. Now, when you have muscle imbalances around your joints, the joints aren't in the best position to move. Now, in order to have good movement quality and to stay injury-free, or at least reduce the risk of injury, your joints need to be put in a good position. So when you have muscle imbalances that pull the joints out of those good positions, you're at a heightened risk for injury, your movement quality suffers, you don't move as well, that means you're not going to play golf as well. And you have the risk for injury. But also when your hip flexors are tight and weak and downregulated, meaning there's not enough neural drive going into those motor units, that will have implications for your glute max as well. It's just the way your neurological system is set up. When your hip flexors are downregulated and weak, your glute max will be downregulated and weaker. Now, the implications of that are that your pelvis will be out of alignment. If your pelvis is out of alignment, then again, that impacts posture and joints up and down the kinetic chain. Your hamstrings could get tighter. Your lumbar spine could be pulled into too much extension. It can even affect your shoulders, your knees, and your ankles. So your hip flexors are a very important muscle group, and we got to get them functioning correctly. Especially from a golfer's point of view, you need that glute max to be strong and have some good neural drive going into it, because you need that glute max to extend those hips. That's really important in the golf swing, especially at impact. That front side needs to drive hard into the ground so your ankle, knee, hip, and shoulder are in one line, and your hip is extending up and backwards. That's the position you need to get to at impact. And with a weak glute max, it's really tough to do that. So in this video, we're going to give you several ways to improve the functioning of your hip flexors. So let's get started. The psoas is very important. You have to activate that so you can open up the front, that you can extend better, and also so that when you do exercises to improve the glute max, it can be more effective. So Cheryl is with me now, and we're going to show you how to activate your psoas so that you can put more neural impulse into your glute max as well, and then the exercises become more effective. So first we're going to test Cheryl's hip flexor strength. So she's going to put her arm here. Now, she's going to put her knee at about 60 degrees of flexion. That's where the hip flexor works the best. Now I'm going to press down on Cheryl's knee, and she's going to try to resist. I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to tell her to hold, and she's going to try to resist. You ready, Cheryl?
Ready.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, hold strong. And it's tough to do. Okay? So now we're going to use some neural lymphatic points to help Cheryl improve the strength and the neural activation in her hips. Now, Cheryl's going to do them. I'm going to show you what they are. Neural lymphatic points, you find your belly button, and to the left and to the right are areas that you're going to just rub. Now, it's not Rolfing. You don't have to rub very hard. You just let your fingers meet the tissue. And it doesn't have to be that precise. You know, right in here is fine. You can rub that side, 20, 30 seconds, up to 60 seconds is plenty. So Cheryl's going to do that, and then we're going to retest. So remember, the psoas, the hip flexors work best at about 60 degrees, 45 to 60 degrees of hip flexion. Ready, Cheryl? 1, 2, 3, hold strong, and
Better.
She gets a little bit more strength there. So it's really important to activate your hip flexors so that you can really work on your glutes more effectively. We showed you how to activate your hip flexors. As long as you're activating your hip flexors, you might as well activate your glute max. The neural lymphatic points for your glute max are behind your head. So all you're doing is tracing your skull, the base of your skull, and just rubbing. Again, you can do this for 30 seconds, a minute. You can do it longer if you want. Do one side and the other side. So you're going from point just about by your ear. You just trace in the back of your skull. It's not that specific. You just rub. The other points for your glute max are at your jawline, right at the top. So you're going to take your index finger, you're going to put it right in there, and you're going to let your finger meet the muscle in there. You don't have to press too hard. You might actually find this a little tender. And again, 30 to 60 seconds, a little more if you want. And you're going to rub one side. You're going to get the other side. So once again, while you're doing your hip flexors, you might as well do the glute max because that really makes an impact. So the neurolymphatic points for your glute max are behind your head. You trace the skull, and at the top of your jaw, right in there. Okay, so we're going to show you how you can increase your hamstring range of motion without stretching. And we do this through neurolymphatic points. First, we're going to test Cheryl's hamstring range of motion, because when you do these, you want to test and retest, because then you would have no basis of knowing how this works. So Cheryl's going to relax her leg, and when you do this on somebody, you want them to have a relaxed leg. I feel her weight here, and then we're going to get her range of motion, and she's, right about there. That's about where I feel some resist. Okay, so Cheryl has activated her glute max. Now, what's going to happen is the glute max now is activated, and it's going to realign her pelvis so that that hamstring isn't pulling so much. It's relaxed. Ready? And so we got 90 degrees on that side. I could go more. And then relax your leg. And we got 90 degrees on that side. Behind your head, in here, to the left and right of your belly button. When you do these, you do both sides. You don't do one or the other. So if this side is tight, you wouldn't do one side. You want balance. One way to get some release in these tight hip flexors is to use a softball and do some self-massage. Now don't forget, the hip flexor attaches into the interior of your leg. It goes over your hip and attaches into your lumbar spine. So I'm going to lay on this softball. I'm going to put this softball right here on my hip. So if that's the pelvis plate, I'm just going to put it right there, and I'm going to breathe into it. Deep diaphragmatic breaths, inhaling and exhaling through my nose. That's going to send a parasympathetic signal or a relaxing signal through the neurological system that this position I'm in is okay, it's not a threat, and we can relax these hip flexors. So I have that softball right on the pelvis. Now I'm going to take some deep breaths and let that ball sink right into the muscle structure that I'm trying to work on, that hip flexor. Deep diaphragmatic breaths, inhaling and exhaling through your nose. And just let that ball do its work and sink into that tissue. If it's too painful, and it may be very painful, you may be very tight and very stiff, and it's hard to just sink into this. So prop yourself up a little bit and just breathe from this position. You go to where you can. It's up to you, but you don't want to be in too much pain. You want to begin to get gradual releases in the muscle, and muscle tissue will release to diaphragmatic breathing, relaxing, and pressure. So that's one way to get some release into a tight hip flexor. After you've done some self-massage on that psoas, that hip flexor, you can also begin to stretch it. Now, again, with stretching or any kind of mobilizing, you need to breathe. You need to send that parasympathetic signal that these positions are okay. If it's a stressor, the neurological system is not going to release the muscle. So I've set up a band like on this plyo box. I'm going to step into it, and I'll show you how you can get some distraction and also work on that psoas. So I have this band high up in my hip. Now I'm going to go into a half kneeling position. Now, you've often seen people, I'm sure, stretch their quadriceps with a deep stretch like this. And that's not what we're looking for here. This is a little more subtle. We're trying to mobilize this hip flexor. So first of all, we're using isometrics. You have to have your glute on. The glute is on because you want to control your lower back. You don't want to be just hanging in this. you want to have some control. So I'm squeezing my glute, I'm staying tall, and I'm just pushing my hip forward. And I'm using this band now as a way to get my feet, the head of my femur forward a little bit and to help with the stretch. So I'm staying tall, turn the butt on, and I'm pushing forward. Now, to make this a little more effective, I'm going to put my hands over my head. Butt is on, and maintaining a neutral spine and leaning forward. I could also put this arm over my head and get a little more stretch. Butt stays on, so I'm not really getting my shoulders back like this. I'm trying to stay in that neutral spine, isometric hold, hand over head, and push the whole body forward. That's one method to stretch a hip flexor. And by the way, if you're really interested in these activations, you really have to look into the website Reflexive Performance Reset. It's run by two great coaches, Chris Korfus and Cal Dietz. We love them. We followed them for many years at Inner Strength Sports Conditioning. We use a lot of their techniques. If this is of interest to you, I highly recommend their courses. So thanks for watching.